One day in the future, when I'm old and my IRA account is running on empty, and I have to find new ways of supporting myself, I will sell my excommunication letter on eBay. I'm hoping it will be worth something, because there are very, very few people that have printed excommunication letters. Copernicus, Joan of Arc, and a few others. Excommunication in Latin means to be out of communion, to be outed from the communion, to be kicked out from the community. So it is an idea that a community singles out one person or a group of persons, and that community tells that person or group of persons, you don't belong here any longer. You have no right to sit at our table any longer. So literally, excommunication means you cannot come to this table any longer. That our family doesn't want to see you on Thanksgiving ever again. So that letter was signed on December 17th, 2005, but who's counting, right? For 1 week, between December 17th and December 24th at 10 p.m., I was out of community. I was all alone on my own. I didn't have a church. This is the ideal of excommunication. They make you feel so outside, then eventually you go back to the bishop, kiss his ring, and ask for forgiveness. But on December 24th, the same year, this community has embraced me and incommunicated me. Some of you were there. Some of you remember that experience of church's community alive in the face of stupid and mindless persecution. Excommunication and incommunication. It all happened to me in the space of 1 week. And hopefully one day I can sell the paper on eBay and be rich. But notice that it was the people who were making such decisions in relation to other people. It wasn't God, even though sometimes I think our bishops think they are God Almighty. And it wasn't God who was incommunicating me here when I came all alone. It was people again. Ex and in. Two very important words. Two words that can change one's life, for better or worse. Exclusion, inclusion. The same root, the same idea. To be outside, to be inside. And notice that in the gospel story today, a beautiful parable of prodigal son, the feast the big party, the big reception at the table happens by the initiative of Father, the metaphor for God, of course. God is setting up a feast. There is lots of food, drinks, hopefully some pierogi, and everybody is having great time. Now, one character you don't want to be in biblical stories is a fattened calf. A fattened calf always gets slaughtered. So be a skinny calf. Don't be fattened calf in the story in the Bible. But if you are a prodigal son, the party is for you. If you are a good son that never left home, the party is for you as well. And the exclusion or inclusion is not the choice of God. Have you noticed that? And God is including everyone by default in this big party. By default, the table that God is setting up means, hey, yo, come and party. Even if you have wasted all your life doing stupid things, this party is for you. The image of Father in that parable is of extravagant inclusion. Extravagant, extreme inclusion. And it is us who have to decide, am I in or am I out? Am I going to walk inside this party and share the table with my brother who was stupid enough to lose all his inheritance with prostitutes, gambling, doing all kinds of crazy things? Or will I choose to exclude myself from that party? So if you are not our president's supporter, imagine going to heaven. God tells you, welcome to heaven, but you have to sit and party next to Mr. Trump. You will come and say, thank you, I'm staying outside. Or will you say, okay, I guess everybody means everybody. Or if you are a supporter of our president, you end up in the pearly gates and they will tell you, we have a special place for you right next to Bernie Sanders. What will you do? Will you stay outside and say, oh, my dead body? Or will you include yourself? You see, the choice of exclusion or inclusion is not God's. The choice of heaven doesn't belong to God. It is not God who tells you, you have to stay outside. It is us who decide sooner or later, do I want to sit with that person at the same table? Or do I let my pride, the favorite sin of Satan, take over and exclude myself? And we do this to ourselves. Sometimes we do it to others. During World War II, when Poland was under Nazi occupation, My grandfather, a young teenager, was rounded up from the street of his town and sent to a forced labor camp in Germany. If you know the story, pretend you don't. While he was in that forced labor Nazi camp, he was assigned to work at a Nazi officer's farm as a farmhand. And being a teenager, he met another teenager. To his own surprise, that other teenager was the daughter of the Nazi officer who owned the farm. So eventually, when he was 18 and she was 16, they were so madly in love with each other that she plans, arranges, and executes his escape from the camp. And she, a 16-year-old German daughter of a Nazi officer, escapes with him all the way to Poland. And they live happily ever after. My grandma always spoke with a funny, thick German accent. Irony of fate, isn't it? But her German family excluded her because she did something unthinkable. No, that person was Untermensch, as they say in German, underhuman, less than human. Why would you even consider falling in love with someone less than human? So that German family of my grandmother disinherited her. But the Polish family of my grandfather opened their arms. Those two crazy teenagers in love. Again, exclusion and inclusion. All done by the hands of people, not God. The worst things parents can do or say to a child is, "We don't want you at our table. We don't want you in our home," or "You are not my daughter anymore." The sin of exclusion that we commit in the name of our values, ideology, or, God forbid, in the name of Bible, is a sin of devil, not of God. Because God is the one who prepares and sets the table for all. God is the God of extravagant inclusion. And whether or not we allow and include others or exclude our sisters and brothers will be on our conscience. As a church, as families, as a country, as global community. It is never God who excludes. Sometimes, unfortunately, it is us who do so. In the second reading today, Paul writes that through Christ, God has reconciled all of us to himself. The reconciliation, the extravagant inclusion has happened once for all. So whether you are outside the door thinking, should I go in or should I go out? Or whether you are deciding, do I let that person in or out. You know what God is choosing. And I hope you and I hope our church, I hope our families, and I hope our country will always choose not the X, but the inclusion. Amen.